So I'm the creator and lead developer now of the jQuery JavaScript library. I also, during my day job, I work for Mozilla, evangelizing JavaScript. So jQuery is what I do at night. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about what jQuery is. Since I assume a lot of you guys are probably building web applications, JavaScript's going to come into it at least a lot of the time. So why I think jQuery is pretty cool. And then specifically what we're doing to, so that you can use jQuery with Rails, and what we're doing about that. All right, so basically jQuery, as a JavaScript library, is structured differently than most of JavaScript libraries. I assume that at least a handful of you are familiar with Prototype, which is one of Ruby on Rails. Prototype tends to extend the JavaScript language, and the jQuery tends to accentuate the relationship between JavaScript and HTML. That is its primary purpose. So why jQuery? And there's a lot of reasons, but most importantly, we have everything documented. We have a really top-notch community. A lot of plugins, I'll talk about it a little bit. And try to keep things really small, so right around 20K. And we work in all modern browsers. So the complete focus of jQuery is finding HTML elements on a page and then performing a series of actions against them. That is the entire crux of jQuery. To find elements, we support CSS selectors, so CSS 1 through 3, and some basic XPath selectors. And using this combination, you can find elements on the page. So specifically, all right. So this is a common jQuery selector here. jQuery has the $ name. It also has the jQuery name. But we like to use $sign as a shortcut. It's optional. So with that, what that's saying is find all div elements on the page, and so it matches those two divs. Again, this is CSS, so it is find div or find element with an ID of body. Find all divs that are children of a div. This is from CSS 2. I want to say, yeah, 2. So find all divs that are a child of a parent div. And this is a little bit of XPath, which is saying find all divs that have a div inside of them. So we sort of have this amalgam of selectors here, but in the end, we think it works out really well. So using that as sort of the backbone now, you're able to start putting features onto it. And jQuery in its 20K has events, DOM manipulation, effects animations, and then ajax. So just to show you a code snippet. So here we find the last input in a form. We assume it's like a submit or something. And when that is clicked, we want to slide down a menu. So what's interesting about this, so you see the action here, where we see, we find a set of elements. So in this case, the set of elements is going to be probably one element, maybe 0 elements. And when it's, and then we're going to attach a click to it, so that when the click occurs, everything inside of here happens. And again, we find the menu element and we animate it down with the nested animation. So here's an example of manipulating an HTML document. So we find all links that have a target attribute, and we append the text on opens in a new window. And then here we set some CSS style properties on the element that has the ID of body. And then some more examples of animations. The second one here is, so we animate all divs simultaneously, and hiding them for half a second. and then when that's done, they all animate back out again for the rest of the second. So what's interesting here is that all this functionality gets built on, but you notice that you never see a loop. Like you never have to iterate through anything. That's all done implicitly for you. So every time you're matching a set and you perform an action against it, that's occurring against the whole set. And then a quick example of just doing some ajax. So here we find the element with ID body. We grab this HTML page and we stick it inside the element. And here we load a script and execute it. And what I think is particularly interesting is that when I created jQuery is that I wanted to be able to find a set of elements, perform an action against them, but I didn't want to stop there. I wanted to be able to perform action on top of action. So what this allows me to do is what I call chaining. And so I can find a div, I can hide it, and then I can color it blue, and then I could slide them down with the animation. And so each time you call an action, the action returns itself again, unless you have an action that mutates the jQuery element. So using this, you can get some massive one-liners that are pretty awesome. All right. So I wanted to go into a quick demo. Just want to go back to the URL real quick, if anyone doesn't have it yet. All right, so, oops. All right, so for my demo, I wanted to, all right, so I took the apple.com iPod iTunes page. And on the side here, there's a nice little widgety thing. So that if you move the mouse over, one side pops down. This is what's commonly referred to as an accordion widget. So what I did was I took a copy of this page, downloaded it, ripped all the JavaScript out of it, and that's what's in the zip file if you download it. And so I want to go through now and recreate that. So this should be the page. Okay, so this is just the page, and all I did was rip the existing JavaScript out, and I stuck jQuery here in the header. So you can see the jQuery scripts getting pulled in from jQuery.com. And I just want to show you roughly how you would go about writing some code. One of the first steps that you have to do almost any JavaScript is that JavaScript that you put in the header can't execute immediately because the whole page isn't loaded yet. So jQuery has a construct, document ready. And what this means is that any code that goes inside of here will wait for the document to exist and then immediately start working on it. And this will occur before the images or CSS are loaded. So you can begin working right away.
If this is slide code, you get a typo in function.
Okay. So the idea then is if we want to duplicate the functionality that's there, it starts, the page begins here with the bottom item expanded. And we want to make it such that when we move over our mouse onto another one, I should probably run another words, onto another one, it animates down. So this is a case where Firebug is immensely helpful. So I don't know if you're familiar with Firebug is a console, and you can really dig into web pages. So specifically, let's go in and understand how this is structured here. So what we can see here is that this is an unordered list. This whole widget is contained within an unordered list. Each of these is an LI. Each LI contains a header, which is that handle that you move the mouse over. And then next to it is a div. So we can see that idiom is repeated again and again. for each of these items. So what we want to do is when your mouse is moved over one of these H3s, the H3 is going to be directly next to a div that is hidden. We want to animate that div open. And if there's going to be another div somewhere that's going to be visible, we want to animate that closed. So it's going to be a toggle effect. So if you look here, we see that this is a UL that has, see, a class of, I think slider might be ideal. So what we can do is, we can sort of test this theory. And we can say, give me all ULs that have a class of slider. And we'll get 2 of them. Because there's one over here, there's one over here, there's one over here. So the part of it is really nice because you can start to play around with the selectors and understand the document and make sure you're doing things right. So what we want to do, I think the first step we want to do is attach a mouse over to the H3s. So if we go into here, we just do an H3, we can now see all these different handles. So that's exactly what we want. So we just copy that code. And now we can attach a mouse over. So what this does is we're finding little H3s that are in these slider things. We're attaching a mouse over that. And so when the mouse moves over, this action's occurring. And the first thing we want to do is we want to start sliding in whatever div is visible. So the way we can do this is we have this little construct, so $sign and around this. And when you're inside a function, it refers to itself. And in this context, this refers to one of the H3 elements, the one that we're currently moused over. So just comment on that. Okay, so now what we want to do is, if we go back and look at the structure of the document, what we want to do is we want to go up to the parent L1. We want to go up to the parent UL. And we want to go back down, and we want to find the visible div, which is going to be this one. So let's do that. So the way we do it is we go up to the LI, up to the UL, and now we find the div that is visible. And we want to hide it. One of the animations that we have to hide is slide up. And you can provide the time in milliseconds, or you can just say slow. And we provide a nice default to do that. So you can see I'm already starting the chain here, that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items going on. So with that in, we can probably finish enough to see if it actually did anything. So let's go back and reload. So theoretically, if we move our mouse over one of these, it should close this one. So the next step now is, while we have that one sliding up, we want to be sliding down the one that's immediately next to where we are. So if we remember, the H3, so the H3 is immediately adjacent to a div. So we can now go in and say this, next. So we're jumping over to the next div, and we're sliding it down slowly. Let's go back. So we reload. We move our mouse over tips. Oh. There we go. And then if we move our mouse over news. So one's sliding shut, one's sliding open. So okay, I wanted to show that real quick, and then.
Is everyone open over every one?
Okay, so what's probably happened right now? So this one's open. I bet if I move my mouse back over it, yeah, it'll do it again. So we can stop that if we want. All right, so what we want to do is we want to say, if I move my mouse over one of those H3s, and the thing next to me is already visible, don't do anything. So what we can say is, if this next is not visible, I guess not to be done next, visible. So if it's, the next element is not visible, then we'll do the animation. So reload, tips, it doesn't do it. So now we can safely move our mouse around and work through these items. And if we go over, the nice thing about jQuery is that we write codes as selectors and it applies to the whole document. So we were specifically looking and targeting that one on the left-hand side. But if we go over to the right-hand side, it works for that one too. And what's nice about this is that since you behave in a more CSS-like manner, and that you apply a wide swath of things, as opposed to saying like, get this thing by ID and do this thing to it. And so we find that that works pretty well.
So is the Apple iTunes using jQuery? Or?
No, they're using Prototype. they just did a relaunch, a redesign, a switch over to Prototype. I've been talking to those guys, but they're
How much smaller would the page be?
it'd probably be much smaller. Right? Well, in that respect, one of the pages that was recently using Prototype, actually I'm getting that here in just a second. So I'll get back in one second. So one of the nice things about jQuery is that we keep the core really small. We only keep in what most people use. So most of the time, people are going to try and use some ajax, they're going to manipulate the page, stuff like that. But now we also have a plugin architecture, so that you can snap in plugins, adding additional pieces of functionality. So this way, you can go and download a plugin, snap it in, and actually I created a, let me see if I remember where it is. Okay, so we're working on a new plugin. We have one drag and drop plugin right now, and we're working on another one called jQuery UI. And so the developer was working on it, and I said, oh, I'm going to make a quick demo. So this is sort of a pane here, and you can drag this panel left and right. So if I drag one over, it snaps into place. And I can drag from page to page. And snap it around. So if I pop into the source of this, actually, sorry, so we have jQuery. I include an easing plugin. So when you saw it bounce in a place like that, that's called easing. So we have a plugin for that. Dimensions helps you locate elements on a page. That's used by UI, which is the drag and drop stuff. And specifically, oh, this is a plugin right here. This is a plugin I wrote called wrapall. And so what this does is it adds a new method onto jQuery, and you can see it in action down here. And what it does is you give it a set of elements, and it wraps all of them in a single other element. And then you see another plugin down here, .draggable, and that was brought in from the drag and drop UI plugin. So, and we literally have hundreds of plugins, so we're pretty proud of that. The community, we're very active, a very active mailing list, over 100 posts per day. And then who uses jQuery? So recently Dave just switched over to jQuery, and just today they just released an iPhone app written in jQuery. So WordPress, Drupal, Technorati, all these guys are using jQuery now. And we have 4 books in the works. So learning, reference, jQuery quickly, and then designing with jQuery. Learning, like literally just came out. It's gonna be on Amazon this week. And then the other three are being written, or these two are being written, this one's like in a planning stage or something. And then the future, so I mentioned jQuery UI, we're working on some theming stuff, and we're working on internationalization. We're also working on jQuery 1.2. There's a roadmap up on the website, so you can go check out what we're thinking of. So all that is a way to get around to talking about using jQuery with Ruby, specifically with Rails. And a lot of this boils down to sort of what the jQuery design philosophy is, and how you would use jQuery to interact with the web page. So specifically, you would use jQuery with Rails just like you would with any other web page, just really no different. So you include jQuery and you can do commands, final divs and remove them. That doesn't change. The particulars come into play when you start doing ajax. You start doing requests to a Rails application. And generally the best way to do this, and I should just preface by saying I'm cribbing most of this information off of Yehuda Katz. He's an excellent jQuery. He's on jQuery core, and he's also a Rails user. So specifically, we send the correct header so that you can handle responses that come from an ajax request. So you can do when the specific format comes in that is an ajax request format.js, you can handle that in a specific way. So specifically, I should say typically, the response that the server would send back would be a chunk of HTML. So you would send back part of your template, and jQuery can take that and load it dynamically into a page. So jQuery has this load command where it takes an HTML page and injects it into a document. And that's a pretty common idiom that we would use in Rails development. Another popular one is when a server sends back a block of JSON data. So that's pretty easy in that Active Record has methods that you to JSON, so you can use to serialize blocks of data and then send it back as a response. And so this, so specifically, this goes. So when that JSON comes back, in the AJAX request, it determines that it's a JavaScript JSON object, deserializes it, and makes it usable for you to manipulate. Then specifically, jQuery has what we feel is a good separation of style and function. So specifically, there is the HTML of your page. There's the CSS, which should be an external file somewhere. And then there's the behavior, which is what jQuery is laying on top. So jQuery is adding things like when you click things, something happens, different behaviors and actions. And so all that code should not be inline in your script, in your page. It should be external and probably in your application.js. And just as a preface saying that jQuery and prototype can play nicely together. We have a method in jQuery called a no conflict. And when you run it, you saw earlier that jQuery had the $sign, $. But when you run no conflict, jQuery untouches itself in $. And then you can now use it using this technique right here. So what this is saying is this is equivalent to the document ready that I mentioned earlier. What the difference is that it passes in a $sign object so that you can use it, the $sign within that context. There's more information about that on the wiki, what exactly that means. So one of the things is that if you wanted to use jQuery in a Rails application, and you wanted to completely switch away and not use any prototype, so we don't have, we don't particularly like RJS. And typically the RJS philosophy is that it sends back a chunk of HTML with a chunk of code. And that code is embedded straight into there, and it executes and defines itself in that way. And We feel that that's overkill. And because you saw earlier, when we wrote that accordion, we didn't have to write 2 chunks of code, 1 chunk for each accordion. We wrote one chunk of code and then applied to all accordions on the page. So we feel that that's the better way to do it. So specifically, an RGS chunk may look something like I'm just postulating. So you can see here is that it includes the on-click events and includes functions for each click. However, with jQuery, what we do is we leave the markup as it is, and then go back through and can attach the clicks later. So it's more unobtrusive. So it's the same idea as not putting style equals in your style information on an element. You want to keep that in a CSS file. It's the same idea. You want to keep all your JavaScript functionality in a separate file. The other thing that people typically ask for are helper methods. So we generally don't provide them, but it's simple enough to set up. So specifically, there's if you wanted to make a link such that when it was clicked, it updated the element with the ID of Baz with the contents of foobar. So what you could do is write a simple little chunk of functionality that locates all of these links, and when they're clicked, load the contents into that specific element. And then with that in play, you can then write a little bit of Rails code to hook that together and create a remote link that duplicates the functionality that you might find in the traditional helper methods. And more information on this, like I said, Yehuda he's all over this. Specifically this, the jQuery with Rails stuff. He's also been writing a jQuery Rails plugin. I'm not going to talk about it too much tonight, but what he's been doing that is using this design philosophy that we've sort of constructed in that good separation of content and everything. He has the ability to chop up JavaScript files on the fly and only serve up specific chunks of jQuery code based upon what page you're looking at. So if you're interested in that, you should take a look at the jQuery Rails plugin, and there's more information on that.
On that, when he does that, when he only serves up the appropriate chunks of JavaScript, does that defeat caching of one common JavaScript by the browser?
Some ways. The primary benefit was that you could keep a base library of functionality that you know you're going to be reusing over and over. And then there's chunks of code that could apply to multiple pages. What would happen is that code would be diced up and served dynamically once cached. And then, so that way, every time you came back to the page, you'd always get that same JavaScript file. We were currently exploring that as a method to cut down on development time and code reuse. So like I said, he has an example Rails project up that's using it, and you can it's in jQuery SVN right now, so you can check it out and see how it works. It doesn't. I mean, obviously, if you loaded all the JavaScript for the entire site on every page, you would get caching instantly. This is more of a way to cut down on that initial huge load, assuming that you had that much JavaScript. Some sites, most sites don't, so maybe that's not such a huge issue. And then some more URLs about the jQuery project. Any questions?
Yeah, when you're loading up like an AHA or something like that, you're loading up a daily populator, and you have a link in there, and that's one of the links that you use a $sign A. Please put a function on here to do something ajax. So you're loading up some elements, and you want that behavior on those elements. How do you go about doing that? I think it's like a FAQs or something.
So in 2 ways. So what he's asking is, let's say when a link of this type is clicked, you want to load its contents into some div. Something like that.
Yeah.
And the problem is that that div is also going to hold links that you want to be able to click and want to be able to propagate through it. Currently, you can do this and just say this, find all links of type, and the way you usually unroll it. So usually pull this out to another function and say this is like the type thing. And you want to attach clicks type thing. You want to attach clicks to the type thing. So you kind of unroll yourself. So that's one way. The other way is something that we're really excited about. And this is, because that is an incredibly common question. So we have a plugin, it's called Behavior, and we're probably going to be renaming it to LiveQuery. And we're hoping, we're really trying to get the file size down and get it into jQuery 1.2. And what it allows you to do now is say, data-type, so the behavior plugin right now, you say behavior, click, and then your function. And we can now remove all this. And it takes care of everything. So that the next time a link of a.type comes in, no matter where it comes in, we find it, we attach the click event to it again.
Why do you $sign and this inside there? Does it seem like you're trying to find something that you already have?
So inside of, so you're asking why do you do that?
Why do you bother with the $sign?
So the way it works right now is that this is equal to the literal DOM element, the original DOM element. So that provides access to all the original stuff, like
that you're using there.
href, append child, all the traditional things. What this is equal to is the jQuery enhanced. I guess that's one way of thinking of it.
So that would be a nest object.
Right. So I mean, because if I did this dot find, it wouldn't work. But if I did this dot find, then I can find something.
You tell this dot href.
Or I should say, this dot href works, and if you wanted to access the attribute through jQuery attribute.
So it's not the DOM.
Yes.
So, way back at like slide 2 or 3, you were talking about some of the accessors that you could use in the Finder, and the fact that you could use both CSS and XPath.
Mm-hmm.
It almost seemed, so I guess you had one example that was div square bracket div,
Yep.
and you said that was an XPath example.
Yep.
How do you distinguish between that and the CSS method?
We require that you have the add symbol, so from XPath. That's probably going away at 1.2. In that we're going to start opting to have better CSS compliance. So it's very likely that in a couple months we're going to be unrolling XPath functionality. It wasn't terribly
Well, the
awesome
fact
to
that
begin with.
if you support CSS 3, then you're not really missing much.
You are. CSS 3 is horrible. I'll say it right now. CSS 3 is horrible. It's incredibly stupid. Fiercely stupid. I could do a talk on how stupid it is. I mean, because you have stuff like div tilde div, which finds all divs after the current element.
Yeah.
It's after a sibling. You have div plus div, which is the next. There's no way to go back. You can't say like minus or double squiggle. I have no idea what the opposite would be. You can only go to children. You can't go to parents. You can't see if anything contains anything else. Yeah. So the way we work around this right now is you get methods like dot parent,
Yeah.
dot next. we could have added our own selectors and made this sort of bastard language, or, I mean, what we have right now is sort of, you know, the bastard language, and that you can do stuff like, foo, you know, bull XPath with CSS. Like I said, that's, we're probably gonna undo that simply for the sake of keeping everyone sane. Any other questions? Yes?
In your, one of the slides, you had that chaining example where there was, you hit it, then you changed the color, and then you slid it.
Yep.
Is there, what would happen in something like that? Would it all happen simultaneously, you know, sequentially and almost simultaneously, so you wouldn't see some of the in-between stuff? I mean, the hiding and the sliding, how does that,
Okay,
what does that
so
look like?
some actions happen instantly, some actions are delayed, meaning that, so hide is instant, I should say the hide happens instantly, then it changes the color to blue, and then it starts the slide down animation.
Or would we see that? I'm
No,
just-
I mean, in that,
Because it's hidden, would we see any of the other effects afterwards?
well, I mean, you can start to see the slide down, because it would hide and then start sliding down. But it, I mean, it happens so quickly in that, I think what you're saying is that it will hide first, and then it'll change the color of the blue. So, I mean, anything you do after the hide, or at least until you start showing it again in some way,
Okay,
it won't be visible.
okay.
So they don't happen, they happen serially, not synchronously. With the exception being is that animations, so if I had, something and I wanted to slide it down and slide it up, that would, the second animation to slide up would be cute. So it would slide down, and then by the time you finish, the slide up would trigger, and then go back up, as opposed to trying to happen instantly.
Okay, although it looked like in your Apple example that the two sliding up and sliding downs are happening sort of one little bit at a time, right?
Okay, so those were happening simultaneously because they were happening on two different things.
Right.
So it only cues like that when it happens the same thing at the same time. Generally speaking, most people don't want to do two animations at the same time with the same thing.
Right.
We do provide the method, or we're working to provide better methods to provide more complex animations. There was another question I saw?
So if you did a dot blue at the end there, it would
Alright.
look exactly the same as if you did a dot blue at the beginning.
Yes.
Because it just happens.
Yeah, so I think it's safe to say. Any other questions? Yep.
So I think in the very first slide, maybe the Jello account, right? Is the reference to Ditto technical?
Yeah, that's, when I first released it, I called it jQuery New Wave JavaScript. It's I made the logo of a Google hat. And so, and right now we're working with a logo designer to actually get a real logo that isn't done by me and horrible.
It's great stuff.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll have something real coming soon. Yes?
Are there any issues using jQuery and widgets, chance of JavaScript running on other sites from where you're actually doing your stuff?
No, we're actually really cool in that respect. One case study is that, so MSNBC, they wanted to build this nice ajax-y politics, it's pretty slick. And the issue is that in a site that large as MSNBC, like, no one controls what's actually in a page. It's a giant war zone. So they wanted to, it was pretty much a requirement that anyone sticking something in a page, it couldn't in any way conflict with anything else in the page. And so the guy said that jQuery was perfect. He used it because it can introduce at most one element or one variable into the namespace, and you can rename that variable. So it's it's completely hands-off in that respect. So, I mean, there's one other one where someone wrote, I think it was a Firefox extension, where they injected jQuery in every page, or something crazy like that. Or no, I think it's once you hit a button, it injected jQuery in a page, then some overlay or something. But the thing is, they wanted to make sure that they could go to any page on the internet and have jQuery be injected and not cause conflicts or everything. It worked. So yeah, it's pretty hands-off. Any other questions? Yep.
I'm curious about the performance and of attaching code to links. You showed the example of prototype versus jQuery, where prototype you might have to duplicate the code, but it would have the on-click on each A tag, whereas in jQuery you're going to attach it later. What's the implications of client-side performance?
Okay, so we're talking the performance hit. I mean, what magnitude are we talking here? Are we talking like 10 links, or are we talking like 10,000 links?
Most pages only are going to have 10.
I mean, almost any way you slice it. So it's going to be 10 links, and let's say it's 100 bytes extra per link that you're passing to the prototype. How long does it take to pass the extra half K? And is that going to be less than 4 milliseconds, which is how long it takes to jQuery? Yeah. So I guess it can be. I haven't done any pure performance analysis on that. I mean, that seems kind of weird, testing the speed of network versus. I don't know.
That's a fair
I guess on that one, what have you guys done to resolve the class selectors? So remember a while back was in class selectors have a little issue when you're trying to traverse a range document.
Yeah, so class selectors used to be pretty slow. We've been getting much faster.
Yeah, okay.
With 1.1, we released speed improvements. With 1. Well, just after that, we released some more speed improvements. And then just was it about a week or two ago, I sat down for like a weekend, and I got the speed improvements for about 800%. So like we're near the border of, like we're fastest in IE, we're fastest in Safari, I think. I mean we're holding on, and we're still 20K. That's a big thing. Any other questions? Well, thank you. I have my business cards up here if you want to contact me later, but yeah, come talk to me. Thank you.
So that's it for this meeting. Next month, we really don't have an agenda, so we're looking for speakers for next month. It's middle of the summer, so it's kind of tough to find some speakers, but if you want to speak, send a message to the group list. And I guess that's it. And sometimes afterwards, people meet at John Harvard's and hang out, have a couple of beers. So